Harry Osborn's mood was utterly foul, a metaphorical black cloud hovering over his head, murderous thoughts swirling within him. His once bright life, he felt, was about to descend into an inescapable hell. Lugging a large suitcase, sporting floral board shorts, flip-flops, and hair tousled over his forehead, he slouched before the gates of Tianfu University. Glancing up at the 4 elegantly calligraphed characters, Tianfu University, he nearly burst into tears. It was the first day of the new school year, and as one of the top 3 universities in the country, located in the second ring road of Shanda City, the atmosphere was exceptionally lively, filled with joyous excitement, a stark contrast to Harry Osborn's current state of mind. Beside the imposing statue at the school gate hung a massive red banner with gold lettering, "Warmly welcome new students from all over the country." It made one wonder if it was a welcome to learning or a welcome to tuition payments. Numerous parents accompanied their children for enrollment, some even with extended family in tow. Whether dressed in elegant attire or simple clothes, everyone wore bright smiles. Getting into such a prestigious university was a matter of ancestral pride, a guarantee of a bright future, at the very least. But Harry Osborn couldn't muster a smile. As the heir to the Osborn Group, a top 10 global corporation, a man hailed as a genius since childhood, he never imagined he'd end up like this, a freshman at Tianfu University, in the economics department no less, a subject he'd already mastered with a Harvard PhD last year. The thought of spending the next year with his unseen fiancée, who also happened to be his freshman homeroom teacher, gave him a splitting headache. Harry Osborn dropped his suitcase, slumped down, and chain-smoked 3 cigarettes, wishing he could find a piece of tofu to bash his head against. After a long, gloomy contemplation, he finally shook his head in resignation, pulled out the crumpled admission notice from his pocket, stood up, and listlessly walked into the campus. The entrance led to a straight road flanked by spacious parking lots, already filled with luxury cars. Mercedes and BMWs looked ordinary, there were even a couple of Cadillac ultra-luxury cars, enough to hold a small-scale auto show. Tianfu University was indeed a place where dragons and snakes mingled, Harry Osborn thought to himself. Many students along the road turned to stare at the guy in board shorts enrolling, whispering and gossiping. More than a few female students cast flirtatious glances, their eyes sparkling. Although the guy's board shorts and flip-flops were somewhat unbecoming of the university's image, his tall, angular figure exuded a certain handsomeness. His slightly messy hair, falling over his forehead, added an indescribable air of worldliness. In an instant, several bold female students began to stir, eager to make his acquaintance. Harry Osborn paid no attention to these big boobs, small brains, girls, continuing to walk forward with a sullen expression, eager to finish enrollment and report back to his old man. Damn! Just then, a sudden, ear-splitting screech of brakes ripped through the air from behind. Harry Osborn's face hardened, his pupils contracting sharply as he spun around to witness a fiery red Ferrari F430 hurtling towards the parking lot at a reckless 180 miles per hour, its arrogant design matching its arrogant speed. At that very moment, a slightly plump girl darted into the street. Seeing the imminent collision, the Ferrari braked hard, but lost control, fishtailing spectacularly before careening directly towards Harry Osborn. Numerous students nearby witnessed the terrifying scene, gasping and covering their mouths in horror, their hearts pounding in their chests. Chapter 2 The woman driving the Ferrari F430. Harry Osborn froze, his expression cold as he watched the Ferrari, though significantly slowed, still speeding towards him. His face grew even colder in that instant. Harry Osborn braced for the intimate embrace of the Ferrari, but at the last possible second, another screech of brakes pierced the air, and the car finally lurched to a halt, its front end a mere 10 centimeters from his knees, a truly near miss. Harry Osborn remained rooted to the spot, his anger simmering, threatening to boil over and compel him to yank the driver out and deliver a thorough thrashing. Bloody hell, my day was already crap, and now this. Just then, the driver and passenger doors of the Ferrari swung open, revealing 2 imposing men in black suits and sunglasses. Their bulging muscles strained against their clothing, and their faces were etched with a chilling coldness that screamed dangerous, like shadowy assassins from a movie. "Are you blind?" One of the men strode towards Harry Osborn, his face contorted in rage, bellowing at the disheveled young man in shorts. "Say that again," Harry Osborn growled, his voice low and menacing. "What? You wanna fight?" The other muscle-bound man stepped forward, his fists clenched, roaring his challenge. "Fine by me. I'm in a foul mood and looking for someone to take it out on." Harry Osborn, done with pleasantries, dropped his suitcase and prepared for action. Meanwhile, passing students stopped to gawk and whisper amongst themselves. "Stop!" A woman's voice, elegant yet icy, cut through the air. Harry Osborn turned to see the rear door of the Ferrari open, revealing a statuesque woman in a crimson dress. Her long legs extended gracefully, accentuated by black high heels, and a pale amethyst crystal pendant adorned her neck, adding to her aura of refined elegance. Her long, sleek hair cascaded down her back, revealing a patch of creamy skin at the edge of her ear. A gentle breeze stirred, causing a few strands of hair and the hem of her dress to dance lightly in the air. Upon her exquisite face, she wore a pair of reddish-purple sunglasses. A breathtaking beauty, a fiery figure, yet so cold and arrogant that one wouldn't dare offend her. Harry Osborn thought to himself, but continued to regard her with a chilly gaze, not bothering to offer her even a hint of a smile. "Ah, it's her." At that moment, gasps rippled through the curious crowd gathered by the roadside, tinged with a hint of apprehension, adding to the already bustling scene. "Who is she? Do you know her?" "Good heavens, you don't even know Lilith Blackwood, the top beauty on campus. You've completely wasted your time here. Well, maybe it's for the best. If you see her again, steer clear. Provoking her will bring you nothing but trouble. Oh dear, this new student is in for it. Excuse me, did I bump into you?" At that moment, the beauty walked directly up to Harry Osborn, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly as she spoke, her tone casual yet laced with a hint of apology. Even her apology seemed to carry a touch of arrogance. "I think you should keep your dogs on a tighter leash. Racing on campus isn't exactly something to brag about." Harry Osborn's expression remained grim as he retorted, "Beautiful, yes, but apparently lacking in proper upbringing. You." In an instant, the apologetic smile vanished from the beauty's face, replaced by a look of icy anger. "What? Did I say something wrong?" A cold smile played on Harry Osborn's lips. His mood, already sour, had been further soured by this commotion, and he felt anger burning within him. At that moment, the beauty's two burly bodyguards simultaneously stepped forward, flanking Harry Osborn. Their faces darkened with a menacing air. It seemed that if the young man dared to utter another disrespectful word, they would beat him to a pulp. "Take your lecherous eyes off me, or I swear I'll kill you." The beauty's face hardened, her arms reflexively crossing over her chest as if to ward off the man's invasive gaze. She spoke through gritted teeth. Chapter 3, Disciplining the Rascal. The tension between the two seemed to escalate. The surrounding students, who had been chattering excitedly, fell silent, their eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them. The gazes directed at Harry Osborn, however, were filled with pity and sympathy. After all, the student in shorts and flip-flops, who looked undeniably poor, had managed to offend the infamous Lilith Blackwood on his first day. It was a truly unfortunate and ill-omened start. Of course, there were plenty who relished the drama and commotion. For these idle students, having a spectacle to watch was a welcome diversion, adding a bit of spice to their otherwise monotonous academic lives. But, when everyone thought this freshman, clutching his acceptance letter, would beg forgiveness and slink away from Lilith Blackwood's wrath, Harry Osborn instead leered, drool trickling from the corner of his mouth, and clucked his tongue, saying, not bad at all. Nice figure, smooth skin, just a bit of a firecracker, eh? In a flash, Lilith Blackwood's face drained of color, her teeth grinding as sparks flew from her eyes. Glaring at the impudent man before her, she hissed at her two underlings, "Teach this bastard a lesson." The two bodyguards, having reached their limit of patience, lunged forward, fists aimed squarely at Harry Osborn's stomach. Oof! A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Every gawking onlooker seemed to anticipate the audacious freshman's imminent beating, expecting him to be either pummeled half to death or carted off to the hospital a broken mess. The more faint-hearted female students squeezed their eyes shut, unable to bear witness. Just as the bodyguard's fists were about to connect with Harry Osborn's gut, his form blurred. He evaded their combined attack with a swift sidestep, followed by a sweeping kick. Oof! A pained cry echoed as one of the bodyguards, all 250 pounds of him, went flying like a kite with its string cut. He crashed headfirst into a parked Ferrari, then crumpled to the ground. His insides churning from the brutal kick, the bodyguard clutched his stomach and writhed on the ground, sweat beading on his forehead. His sunglasses askew, his face contorted in pain, he tried and failed to rise, staring at Harry Osborn with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The other bodyguard stood dumbfounded, staring incredulously at the man before him. Though not frail, Harry Osborn was certainly not imposing. Gritting his teeth, the bodyguard launched a vicious kick towards Harry's stomach. Harry Osborn's face remained impassive as he threw a punch. Ugh! Another groan escaped the bodyguard's lips as Harry's fist connected with his face. The bodyguard's outstretched leg froze mid-kick, barely an inch from Harry's stomach. The bodyguard's face swelled instantly, resembling a pig's head. He stood frozen for a moment before collapsing to the ground with a howl, clutching his mouth and spitting out a mouthful of blood and two front teeth. His groans of agony filled the air. A stunned silence fell over the scene. The student onlookers stared, agog, at the shorts and flip-flops clad freshman, seemingly unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Many of the female students, however, were filled with a sudden adoration, practically ready to swarm their hero and whisk him off to the nearest motel for some celebratory studying. The beautiful woman, too, was speechless. Her gaze shifted from her groaning bodyguards on the ground to Harry Osborn, her eyes now holding a flicker of apprehension, though mostly burning with anger and humiliation. Harry Osborn patted the fist he'd just used to punch the guard's face, a blow that had clearly stung. Ignoring the two groaning figures on the ground, he crossed his arms and looked provocatively at the beautiful woman behind them. "Seems your two guard dogs aren't all that scary. I expect a sincere apology for that little incident, and we can consider this matter closed." Chapter 4, You Will Pay for This, in Your Dreams. The woman's face flushed crimson with anger. Her small fists clenched, teeth gritted, she spat out each word. "Really?" Harry Osborn's smile widened. He touched his nose casually. "I have to admit, you're a rare beauty, though your temper leaves something to be desired. Do you believe I'll claw your eyes out?" Seething, on the verge of exploding, the furious woman snarled, taking a step closer. A hand shot up, poised to strike his face. Before her hand could connect, Harry Osborn grabbed her wrist, stepping forward until he was practically pressed against her. His smile vanished, replaced by a grim expression. Leaning close to her ear, he murmured, "I'm not one for chivalry. I can overlook what happened, but don't test my patience." As he spoke, his nose grazed her ear. "You." Terror finally flickered in the woman's eyes. Her other hand, still trapped in his grip, twisted uselessly. Teeth grinding, she let out a cold huff, unable to speak. "I suggest you train your attack dogs better and tell them to drive more carefully. Cars are useful tools, but they can become deadly weapons. Wouldn't want that, would we?" Harry Osborn released her and returned to his suitcase, picking it up from the ground. "I swear, you'll pay for this," the woman shrieked, face burning, as she watched the shorts-clad figure saunter across the university grounds. She stalked over to the two guards and snapped, "Useless. Get in the car. You're embarrassing me." She yanked open the car door and climbed inside. The Ferrari sped off, though at a considerably slower pace than before. Harry Osborn watched the expensive sports car disappear, sighing and shaking his head with a wry smile. The woman's temper was indeed fiery, a wild horse hard to tame. He wasn't the type to harass every beautiful woman he saw, nor was he trying to show off his martial arts skills. It was just that the woman's temper had been particularly grating. Already in a foul mood, her actions had rubbed him the wrong way, further fueling his irritation. Seeing the good show end, the surrounding students finally began to disperse, but as they walked, they whispered and chattered non-stop. Of course, the topic of discussion was about the freshman who had just arrived at school and teased the famous beauty Lilith Blackwood. Harry Osborn, naturally, wasn't in the mood to pay attention to this, dragging his suitcase towards the registration area, still head down, full of misery and resentment, looking up at the joyous scene in the school, suddenly feeling a headache coming on. Nevertheless, he still had to drag his suitcase towards the registration area. Once registered, his gloomy life here would begin. And all of this was a gift from his old man back home. At least 3 nights ago, he was still in the couple's suite of the most luxurious Karen hotel in Texas. But unexpectedly, the next morning, he was apprehended from the hotel by men sent by his old man and dragged straight back to Shanda City. And so, our young master of the Osborn family fell into this predicament, his bright and glorious days gone, never to return. Chapter 5, Silly Girl. Osborn's style as the heir to the Osborn Group, ranked in the global top 10, Harry Osborn truly felt that his life was utterly miserable. The Osborn Group was founded by his old man, starting from a small supermarket in Donghai City 20 years ago, and has now developed into a large conglomerate spanning various fields such as electronics, retail, catering, entertainment, and real estate. It has gained unprecedented fame internationally, with the company's assets entering the world's top 10 3 years ago, and his father, Norman Osborn, becoming the top billionaire on the Forbes list. And every time he thought of his old man, Harry Osborn couldn't help but shudder, his head pounding as if it would split open. Clearly, the chairman of the board of the Osborn Group, clearly a prominent figure frequently appearing in major financial magazines worldwide, and clearly someone whose slightest decision could cause economic fluctuations, yet he lacked the refined demeanor expected of such a prominent figure. Thinking about it, Harry Osborn was over 20 years old, the sole legitimate heir to a massive commercial empire, and his own son, yet this old man always had a stern face, stricter than a brick. If Harry Osborn slightly displeased him, he would have his bodyguards restrain him, carry him into the study, and give him a beating. Yet, he always claimed it was tough love, for his own good. In short, from childhood to adulthood, Harry Osborn trembled whenever he saw his old man, almost developing a psychological complex. This time, being dragged back from the United States was a nightmare for Harry Osborn. As soon as he returned, he was dragged into the study and beaten, then forced to break up with the second daughter of that governor. He was even made to personally call the governor, demanding he discipline his daughter. Actually, Harry Osborn didn't care much about this, there were plenty of fish in the sea. But he didn't expect that this was just the beginning of the nightmare. Just when he was limping from the beating his old man gave him, thinking he had overcome a major tribulation, Norman Osborn sternly told him that he had to immediately marry his childhood fiancée. In a flash, Harry Osborn's face darkened, and he nearly fainted on the spot. As for his betrothed, he knew the story. 20 years prior, his future father-in-law had saved his old man's life, sparking a close friendship. Whether some shady dealings were involved, no one knew, but they ended up becoming sworn brothers, complete with burnt offerings and blood oaths. And then, thanks to some busybody, baby Harry Osborn, still suckling at his mother's breast, was promised to his sworn brother's daughter. Harry had met his fiancée, Mary Jane Watson, once as a child, and not since. His old man, however, frequently sang her praises, clearly delighted with his future daughter-in-law. Word was, after completing her MBA in America 2 years ago, she returned to Shanda City and, instead of joining a multinational corporation, took a lecturer position at her alma mater, Tianfu University. She'd racked up awards in economic journals and forums, quickly becoming a rising star in the field, and at only 26, she was already a professor. Harry couldn't fault her, but marriage was a death sentence, and he wasn't ready for such a grim fate. There were plenty of other fine, foxy ladies out there just waiting for him to soothe their lonely hearts. Besides, even though he'd only met her once, in his memory, his fiancée was a little she-devil. The thought of her still sent shivers down his spine. Every time his old man mentioned his precious daughter-in-law, Harry felt a wave of dread wash over him, his heart pounding in his chest. That single encounter with his fiancée remained etched in Harry's memory like a scar, an unforgettable experience that had become a psychological shadow. It happened when Harry was 5. His father brought his future bride to the Osborne family villa for a visit. The girl, in a floral dress and pigtails, had a rosy, chubby face, adorable, really. Except, despite being 2 years older than Harry, she still had 2 prominent boogers hanging out of her nose. Harry, not yet wise to the adage, "Don't judge a book by its cover," was completely taken in by the boogers. He instantly labeled her, "Booger Girl." He trotted over to her and, puffing out his chest, declared, "You're gonna be my wife someday. Come here and give hubby a kiss." Booger Girl, in a fit of rage, grabbed Harry, dragged him to the busiest part of the street, wrestled him to the ground, stripped him naked, and ran off. And there, on the street, was a 5-year-old boy, red-faced, tears streaming down his cheeks, stark naked and running for his life. To Harry's horror, after enduring the laughter of the street and running home in a fury, he found that Booger Girl had gotten there first. She'd spun some tale to his stone-faced father, who, ignoring Harry's tearful account, promptly gave him a walloping. Harry Osborne finally understood, this silly girl was absolutely not someone to be trifled with. After this incident, his fiancée became a nightmare he couldn't shake off. Just the thought of her sent chills down his spine and made his heart pound. So, every time he heard that the silly girl was coming to visit, Harry Osborne would bolt like a cat had seen a mouse, running as far and as fast as he could. From then on, he never saw his fiancée again. Chapter 6. The lecherous man. This time, Harry Osborne's father sternly demanded that he immediately marry his fiancée. For Harry Osborne, this was absolutely out of the question. He would rather die than tremble before that fierce, silly girl every day. Now over 20 years old, he imagined if he angered that silly girl, and she dragged him to the market, stripped him naked, and made him run through the streets, he wouldn't have the courage to live anymore. So, despite having just been thoroughly beaten, Harry Osborne firmly refused. Of course, the consequences were predictable, another brutal beating from his father. According to the Osborne family servants, the agonizing screams from the study lasted for 3 hours, bringing tears to the eyes of many nannies and maids who had grown up with Harry Osborne. What Harry Osborne didn't expect was that his entire family was strangely united on the matter of his marriage. They all banded together, treating him like a class enemy. Even his grandmother, who had always loved him the most, the supreme authority in the Osborne family, like an empress dowager, unexpectedly agreed with Norman Osborne. Without a word, she confined herself to a private room in the hospital and declared that if Harry Osborne didn't marry soon and give her a great-grandchild, she would go on a hunger strike. Harry Osborne was completely defeated. Finally, the whole family gathered in the living room for a negotiation that lasted 8 hours, eventually reaching a compromise on Harry Osborne's marriage. The agreement allowed Harry Osborne to postpone marrying his fiancée for 1 year. However, to foster their relationship and quickly build a harmonious, healthy romance, beneficial to the development of society, Harry Osborne was required to enroll at Tianfu University, where his fiancée, Lam Nok Deep, taught. He also had to attend her class. Furthermore, they had to live together, euphemistically called, proximity breeds love. Of course, the agreement didn't explicitly state whether they were allowed to share a room, but Harry Osborn knew the old lady was hoping they would, so she could soon have a great-grandchild. Harry Osborn reluctantly signed this unequal treaty. Although it stipulated that if they still refused to marry after a year, their families wouldn't interfere further, Harry Osborn knew this was just his father's delaying tactic. He figured if they both remained stubbornly against marriage after a year, the family would erupt into chaos again, resorting to the same old tricks and forcing them into a second unequal treaty. But for Harry Osborn, wasn't this also an unavoidable delaying tactic? What surprised him even more was that his future father-in-law actually agreed to it. He understood everything even more clearly when he learned that after the unequal treaty was signed, everyone in the Osborn family mansion, from the matriarch to the nannies, celebrated with a feast, while Harry Osborn sat dejectedly in a corner, like an abandoned child, his heart cold and desolate. Soon enough, a university acceptance letter arrived for Harry Osborn. And just like that, Harry Osborn officially entered the darkest period of his life, showing up at the gates of Tianfu University in shorts and flip-flops. Thinking about how he would have to live entirely under the shadow of that idiotic and fierce girl from now on, Harry Osborn almost burst into tears, feeling utterly wronged, like a girl walking down the street suddenly groped by a pervert. After much hesitation and ultimate helplessness, Harry Osborn dragged himself to the registration area. After registering, he still had to go to the coffee shop at the school gate. After all, he wasn't staying in the dormitory and wouldn't even have a place to sleep at night. Moreover, he would have to live under the same roof as that idiotic girl. As for having to go to the coffee shop at the school gate later, it was simply because they hadn't seen each other for many years and naturally wouldn't recognize each other. So, with the agreement of both families, they decided to arrange a meeting at the coffee shop at a predetermined time. Good heavens, my old man is full of tricks, even deciding the meeting place and method for them. A coffee shop has been chosen, and the way to identify each other is even more bizarre, holding a red rose, just like going on a blind date. Harry Osborn's father truly didn't miss any opportunity to matchmake the two, hoping they would cultivate feelings and quickly enter a healthy, harmonious, green, clean, and beautiful Osborn-style relationship, ultimately entering the palace of marriage and giving him a grandson. Harry Osborn couldn't help but chuckle wryly and helplessly. Brother Harry. However, just at that moment, an excited voice suddenly rang out beside his ear. Harry Osborn immediately turned around and saw a rather sleazy-looking young man trotting towards him from a short distance away, grinning at him as he ran, making uninformed onlookers think they had some sort of shady relationship. The young man was wearing a wrinkled plaid shirt and a pair of old, ripped jeans with holes at the butt and knees. He also wore flip-flops, which made a slapping sound as he ran. What made it even more comical was that this guy had a center-parted hairstyle that looked like a pot lid on his head, just like those traitorous Hanjian who sold out their country for glory in the past. He also had a few scraggly hairs on his chin, making him look utterly unkempt. Brother Harry, I just heard that you were dragged back from America by the old man and even came to Tianfu University to study. That's why I rushed over here immediately, and I didn't expect to actually run into you. The sleazy young man ran a few steps and arrived in front of Harry Osborn, revealing his yellow teeth, his face beaming, and saliva spraying everywhere as he said, I didn't expect that after half a year apart, Brother Harry is still as dashing as ever, the same demeanor, the same demeanor. He said this while looking Harry Osborn up and down, taking in his shorts and flip-flops. What a stylish monkey. Unexpectedly, Harry Osborn's face darkened, and he delivered a swift kick to the bloke's backside. The bloke stumbled forward, nearly falling flat on his face, but managed to catch himself. His face flushed crimson with indignation as he stood there, his smile vanished, glaring at Harry Osborn like a wronged woman, but keeping his mouth shut. Chapter 7, The Calamity That Wreaks Havoc on Earth. Max Dillon is a walking disaster. His existence serves only two purposes: consuming resources, thereby boosting domestic demand, and creating obstacles to the world's sustainable development, causing distress to honest folk, and incidentally polluting the urban landscape. This is Harry Osborn's highest appraisal of the blighter. In short, this bloke is a societal parasite, an enemy of the people, fully deserving of a place among the four horsemen of the apocalypse. He originally had a rather elegant and generous name, Chin-Chinji. However, while he was still in his mother's womb, all the elders of the Dillon family gathered, racking their brains for 3 days and 3 nights, rejecting thousands of suggestions before finally settling on this one. As the only son of the Dillon family, the 5th-generation heir, everyone hoped that this sprout would grow into a gentleman, a pillar of society and family. But to everyone's disappointment, this sprout grew crooked, not only failing to become a gentleman but turning into a right menace. This bloke is Harry Osborn's best mate since childhood, the kind who'd share the same tattered trousers. Harry Osborn stared at the bloke's neatly parted, traitorous-looking hairstyle and ripped jeans, a mixture of amusement and exasperation on his face. If this deadbeat took a chipped enamel bowl and a walking stick and strolled through a bustling market, he'd probably rake in a fair bit of cash. But Harry Osborn knew full well that the one thing this bloke never lacked was money. What he lacked most, however, was virtue and brains. Old Grandpa Dillon is a war hero, the type who devoted himself to the nation, achieving numerous glorious feats on the battlefield. He's currently the deputy commander of the Southwest Military Region, one of the few full generals in the entire country. As for this bloke's father, it's said that back in the day, under the strict guidance of old Grandpa, he resolutely refused to enter politics and instead stepped into the business world. He single-handedly founded the Chin Group. While not as powerful as Osborn Group, it's still a massive corporation worth hundreds of billions. He has a very good personal relationship with Norman Osborn, like brothers. The two large corporations even cooperate in many areas, so the two families have largely become intertwined. This bloke's aunt, on the other hand, obediently followed old Grandpa Dillon's advice and entered politics. Now, in her early 40s, she's already become the deputy provincial governor in charge of economic affairs for a province, with a boundless future. So, generally speaking, this bloke's entire family has influence in political, military, and business circles. Let's not just talk about Shandu City, even in the entire Southwest region, he's absolutely considered a genuine princeling. But this bloke doesn't have the demeanor of a princeling. He's never done anything in his life to live up to the Chin family's high expectations. From childhood, this guy was a menace, stealing chickens, lifting girls' skirts, copying a feel of his teacher's thighs. In 5th grade, because his favorite teacher had a boyfriend, and he didn't like that, he rounded up his classmates, bagged the boyfriend's head, and gave him a beating. The teacher resigned within 3 days. Brawling was his bread and butter, and he never needed a reason. If someone rubbed him the wrong way, he'd pick up a brick and swing. Everyone who knew him steered clear, so even the most arrogant rich kids in Shandu City would run like mice from a cat at the sight of him, terrified of crossing this walking disaster. In middle school, he actually sat through a whole class and somehow interpreted "great vulgarity is great elegance" as a life motto. He promptly stole his family's household registration book and changed his name to Max Dillon. He nailed the vulgarity part, but the elegance never materialized. This stunt made old Grandpa Dillon's hair stand on end. He nearly shot the little bastard. Mr. Dillon, equally furious, kicked him out, disowning him on the spot. Unfazed, Max took off, only to return days later with a high school girl, announcing his intention to marry and start a family. Old Grandpa Dillon caved. Even worse, as he got older, he developed a bizarre fascination with lonely housewives. He'd prowl upscale neighborhoods, hitting on any attractive woman he saw. To Harry Osborn's astonishment, his smooth talk actually worked, and he snagged a whole harem of them. This, of course, led to numerous husbands chasing him with murderous intent. But Max, unflappable, would face their cleavers without flinching. He'd even brag about his conquests to Harry Osborn, who could only shake his head and call him a master. In his most audacious move, he hit on a mob boss's girl. The boss vowed to have his limbs chopped off. That night, Max snuck into the boss's bedroom, tied him up, slapped him around, and made him beg for mercy. The whole thing was swept under the rug. This guy, a walking calamity, existed solely to make life difficult for others. That was Harry Osborn's definitive assessment. Yet, this same guy, the bane of the Dillon family's existence, was utterly devoted to Harry Osborn, constantly calling him Brother Harry. He might let insults slide if he was in a good mood. But anyone who disrespected Harry Osborn would face his wrath, and he wouldn't stop until they were half dead. Chapter 8, Max Dillon's shadow. This walking calamity, who feared neither God nor man, who drove even the formidable Mr. Dillon to distraction, was afraid of only two people, Harry Osborn and Harry Osborn's father. Because their families were close, this bastard had been freeloading at the Osborn family mansion since he was a kid. But the real kicker was, whenever Harry Osborn screwed up and got his old man riled up enough for a strapping, this guy somehow always ended up getting punished too. So now, just hearing the old man Osborn's name makes him tremble like a leaf, same as Harry Osborn. The only thing Harry Osborn couldn't believe was that this same bastard, just 6 months ago, had fallen head over heels for some girl at another university. He'd come running to Harry, red-faced and stammering, claiming he'd finally found true love. So, he promptly squeezed old Grandpa Dillon for $800,000 something, and secretly donated a whole building to the girl's university. Just like that, he got his acceptance letter, and started chasing after her. Word is, he still hasn't sealed the deal. Harry Osborn had heard about the girl. Apparently, she came from a poor family, and her parents seemed to have a grudge against rich folks because of something that happened in the past. So, this idiot did a complete 180 and started dressing like a pauper, as if he was afraid people wouldn't know he was broke. Brother Harry, I heard you were in the States just the other day. How'd you end up a student at Tianfu University? Max Dillon stammered for a bit, then cracked a lewd grin, took a step closer, and asked cautiously, others might not know, but I do. You already have an economics doctorate from Harvard. What gives? Don't tell me you're like me, chasing some skirt in here. Gotta say though, Tianfu University is famous for its babes. Brother Harry's gonna be living the dream, you little shit. Before he could finish, Harry Osborn's face darkened. Without a word, he aimed a swift Osborn-style kick at Max, hoping to send him sprawling like before. Talk about rubbing salt in the wound. But this time, Max Dillon was quicker on his feet. He dodged clumsily, narrowly avoiding another bruised backside. The grin was wiped off his face, though, leaving him looking like a sulky little bride. His face flushed crimson as he whined, Brother Harry, we haven't seen each other in 6 months. Why'd you have to kick me the second we meet? Serves you right. 6 months gone, and you're still the same annoying prick. Harry Osborn glared at him, not giving an inch, then turned and headed towards registration. Brother Harry, tell me, how did you end up in this mess? But the guy was relentless. Like a clingy puppy, he followed Harry, continuing his interrogation. Utterly defeated, Harry Osborn finally spun around and recounted the tale of the unequal treaty he'd been forced to sign with his grandfather and grandmother. What Harry Osborn didn't expect was that after he finished his story, the bastard's face went white as a sheet. His lips trembled, and he seemed to recall some unpleasant memory. He stood there dumbfounded for a long moment, finally gulping and stammering, Brother Harry, you're fastidious. I can't help you this time. Fastidious, my ass. Harry Osborn finally snapped, grabbing the other man by the collar and delivering a swift Osborn-style head slap. A glint appeared in his eyes. I have to meet that woman later. I'm a bit scared to go alone. You're coming with me. With both of us there, she won't dare cause any trouble. Max Dillon's meticulously parted hair instantly became a disheveled mess, collapsing weakly around his head like a crater. Hearing Harry's words, Max's face paled further. He quickly backed away, eyes darting. Oh, right. I just remembered I have something urgent to do. Gotta go. Try it and see what happens, Harry Osborn glared, feigning a kick. Brother Harry, don't bully people like that. In a flash, Max Dillon's anger was completely gone. He lowered his head, feeling extremely wronged, like an adopted daughter-in-law who had been abused since childhood, about to cry, you know, I also have a psychological shadow of your future fiancée. Harry almost burst out laughing, but managed to maintain a stern expression. If you dare leave, don't blame me for going to your girl at your school and telling her every single embarrassing thing you've ever done. Brother Harry, you're so cruel. Max Dillon was utterly defeated, his expression even more pained than if he were crying. This kid had met the ferocious, crazy girl, once when he was little, after Harry had been stripped naked by her and then wrongly blamed for it. Fearless, after learning of Harry's humiliation, the kid had rolled up his sleeves, brimming with righteous indignation, declaring he would seek justice for his brother Harry. Whether the kid, who was only 3 or 4 at the time, actually sought any justice, Harry didn't know. All he knew was that ever since that incident, the mere mention of Mary Jane Watson would send the kid into a trembling, pale-faced sprint, faster than Harry himself could run. For a long time afterward, whenever the little rascal visited the Osborn family villa, he'd greet Harry like a secret agent making contact, his first question always being, "Is she home?" Only after confirming the ferocious, crazy girl wasn't present would he dare step inside. Damn, even a slick operator like Max Dillon trembled at the name of his fiancée, clearly no match for that woman. It looked like life was going to be very difficult indeed. Not only did he have to be a student under this fierce Osborn woman, but he also had to live under the same roof. Harry Osborn was truly in despair, looking up with a long sigh, tears welling in his eyes. Chapter 9, The Artsy Youth and the Goofy Youth. Even though the registration area was packed like sardines, with Max Dillon, the charmer, nothing was impossible. Using his silver tongue and a face thicker than a city wall, the rascal cut to the front of the line under the resentful glares of everyone. A couple of flattering remarks had the 40-something, thick-waisted, elephant-legged receptionist giggling and blushing like a 20-year-old. With enrollment formalities swiftly concluded, Harry Osborn breathed a sigh of relief only after they'd squeezed free of the throng. A glance at the pristine student ID in his hand, however, brought a wry, almost pained smile to his face. Bloody hell, from this day forward, I'm officially a Tianfu University student. Thoroughly tangled up in the morning's chaos, he resigned himself to his fate, one hand dragging his suitcase, the other gripping Max Dillon's collar, head hung low as they trudged towards the campus gate. Might as well get it over with, if he's doomed, a swift demise is preferable. He just needed to get his luggage to that airhead's place, unpack, and crash. Max Dillon looked no happier, pouting like a scolded child, whining as they walked, "Harry brother, I really gotta go, I have to get lunch for my girl, please let me off the hook." Harry Osborn finally couldn't hold it in any longer, and angrily kicked this bastard's butt. Only then did he shut up, but his face was full of grievance, and tears were about to fall. This only intensified Harry Osborn's apprehension about his fiancée's temper, sending a chill down his spine. The cafe his father had arranged for their meeting was right by the campus gate. Called Purple Romance, its name clearly targeted the student couples, and while not exactly high-class, its pale purple decor had a certain cheesy charm, fitting for young lovebirds. Being still morning, the cafe was sparsely populated, with only 3 or 4 couples murmuring sweet nothings to each other. The background music, the globally renowned The Daydream, with its gentle, melancholic melody, added to the romantic ambience. After a listless detour to the florist next door for a single, vibrant rose, Harry Osborn and Max Dillon finally entered the cafe. 2 young women in black office dresses, purple bows adorning their chests, stood at the reception desk. Their fair skin and ample figures made them look like a couple of ripe peaches, probably Tianfu University students working part-time. Perhaps due to the lack of customers, they were hunched over their phones, looking bored. Only when Harry Osborn and Max Dillon entered did they look up, sizing them up with disdain, seemingly unable to fathom that these two sloppily dressed, flip-flop wearing youths could be paying customers. Even though this wasn't a high-end establishment, a single cup of coffee still cost a few dozen, or even a few hundred yuan, while a typical student's monthly living expenses were only a few hundred yuan. This only amplified the contempt in the waitress's eyes, though they quickly plastered on professional smiles and approached to greet them. Seemingly oblivious to their disdain, and in stark contrast to his earlier timidity, Max Dillon bounded forward, intent on flirting, his shifty eyes glued to their ample bosoms, and his mouth already forming appreciative noises. Annoyed, Harry Osborn smacked him upside his Hanjian-style parted hair, silencing the rascal, who then trailed sullenly behind him to an empty table by the window, where they ordered 2 of the cheapest coffees. Harry Osborn placed the red rose, the token for their meeting, on the table and cautiously surveyed his surroundings. He noticed the few patrons in the cafe, including the 2 girls at the counter, were all staring at him with disdain. Of course, it wasn't just his shorts and flip-flops, but also the bright red rose on the table. One girl even giggled audibly. At that moment, Harry Osborn felt utterly humiliated. Staring at the rose, even he felt like a country bumpkin. Damn it, he'd always considered himself somewhat artsy, yet here he was, a complete fool. He still marveled at his old man's scheming. No phone number for Mary Jane Watson, no address, just this bizarre rendezvous, pretentiously labeled as creating a first impression and a romantic atmosphere. Romantic my ass. Harry Osborn, you're regressing, turning into a blithering idiot. He wanted to bang his head against the table and weep. Max Dillon wasn't faring much better. The notorious, arrogant playboy of the Southwest now resembled a wilted flower, his usually slicked back, Hanjian-esque hair a mess. He sat slumped, silent, seemingly also dreading the impending meeting with this airhead. Brother Harry, what time did your old man set for you and your future wifey? Why isn't she here yet? After a long silence, Max Dillon finally cracked, asking with a wry smile, don't tell me you've been stood up. You know, waiting for death is worse than death itself. Shut up. Harry Osborn snapped, glaring at him. How about we grab a bite first? Tonight, I'll take you to my school, introduce you to some pretty girls, then we'll hit the bars. With Brother Harry's charm, picking up a chick and taking her back to a hotel for some hanky-panky should be a piece of cake, right? Max Dillon winked, leaning in conspiratorially. Better than sitting here twiddling our thumbs, don't you think? If you want to die, just say it. I'll call my old man right now. Harry Osborn ignored the jerk, casually pulling out his phone as if about to dial. No. No. I'll shut up, okay? Max Dillon's smile vanished, his face paling as he frantically waved his hands, begging for mercy. Suddenly, he looked towards the cafe entrance, his whole body trembling. Brother Harry, is that your future wife? Harry Osborn spun around and saw a woman striding through the doorway, a strikingly beautiful and alluring woman. Hashtag chapter 10, my bro wants to marry you. She wore a tight black leather dress that hugged her full, rounded curves. Her long legs, exposed to the air, combined with black high heels, made her look like a sculpted masterpiece of white jade. A thin, high-necked black sweater accentuated her stunning figure and perfect curves. Her long, flowing hair cascaded down her back, revealing only a glimpse of the fair skin of her earlobe, adding to her aura of elegance, sophistication, and intellect. A pair of oversized black sunglasses rested on his face, giving him a distinctly wild appearance. An absolute stunner, Harry Osborn thought, appraising her from head to toe. He couldn't help but admire her. In his old life, a frosty beauty like this would have had him chatting her up in a flash. But right now, he was in no mood, his stomach still churning with unvented fury. The woman stood at the entrance, her eyes sweeping across the cafe before settling on the bright red rose on Harry Osborn's table. A playful smirk touched her lips, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. With elegant strides, she approached an empty table nearby, sat down, and gestured for a cappuccino. She took a delicate sip. Her gaze flickered down to Harry Osborn's baggy shorts and flip-flops, her expression twitching slightly, but her polite smile remained firmly in place. Unseen by anyone, she palmed a small, red plastic rose, no bigger than her thumb, and with a seemingly casual movement, slipped it into her pocket. "Brother Harry." Max Dillon stammered, momentarily stunned. He finally tore his gaze away and leaned forward, whispering, "Is that her? The future Mrs. Osborn? I haven't seen her in 20 years, how the hell would I know?" Harry Osborn snapped, glaring at him. Despite his words, he turned to assess the beauty beside them. Seeing no sign of the rose token, he relaxed slightly, a tense knot in his stomach loosening. "Definitely not," he declared confidently. Max Dillon looked surprised. "How can you be so sure?" "It's been 20 years for you too," he whispered. "Are you thick?" Harry Osborn exploded. "She's not carrying the rose. And use your tiny brain. 20 years ago, she was a chubby, snot-nosed brat in a tacky floral dress with pigtails. You think she could transform into this in 2 decades? Good point, Brother Harry. Solid analysis." Max Dillon looked at him with admiration, giving him a thumbs up. He smacked his lips, a sly grin spreading across his face. Leaning in again, he suggested, "Look, we're just sitting here. Why don't you chat her up, Brother Harry? With your legendary skills, it'd be a piece of cake, right? Imagine taking a beauty like that home. The old man would definitely forgive you. Then you bring up breaking off the engagement, boom. Extra leverage. And hey, if you manage to produce a grandson, fulfilling the old lady's dream of a great-grandchild, she'll be on your side even if the old man objects." "Shut up." Harry Osborn groaned inwardly. The bastard had it all figured out. His stomach twisted with anxiety. The thought of facing the woman who had caused him so much psychological trauma filled him with dread. And yet, this damned nuisance buzzed around me like a fly, his utter wretchedness on full display, yammering incessantly in my ear. Another slap, and his traitorous, center-parted hair became even more disheveled, resembling a ruffled chicken coop perched atop his head. Max Dillon finally shut his trap, his face flushing crimson with a wounded air, like a humiliated little wife. "What are you talking about? Since when do I have years of experience picking up chicks?" Harry Osborn glared at him, his voice a growl. "Brother Harry, you're playing innocent again." Max Dillon's aggrieved expression vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Have you forgotten high school? How many innocent girls did you make cry? You taught me that women nowadays like men with a weathered charm, an absolute weapon, you said. So I followed in your footsteps. Look at me, am I not weathered? Just a few days ago, I charmed the Texas governor's daughter. That's Brother Harry's influence, a glorious achievement. It was nothing, really. I'm not as impressive as you think," Harry Osborn finally conceded, a slight blush creeping up his cheeks as he self-consciously rubbed his nose. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman who had been quietly sipping her coffee beside them lost her faint smile. Her face turned cold. "See? You admit it." Max Dillon crowed, a smug grin spreading across his face. He slapped his thigh. "It's decided then. I'll soften her up, then you swoop in with your manly charm. Easy peasy. I'm doing this for you, Harry, to help you escape the shadow of that airhead. You'll have to thank me with drinks later. Oh, and if you two have a son, I get to be the godfather." "Godfather my ass." Harry Osborn snapped, his face darkening. Before he could stop the obnoxious scoundrel, Max Dillon shot out of his chair and darted over to the beautiful woman. He sat down opposite her, pointed at Harry Osborn, and declared, "Hey there, gorgeous. See him? That's my bro. He wants to marry you. What do you say? Think it over. Chapter 11, Blue Tigress. The woman's face grew even colder. She slowly set down her coffee cup, looked up at the man with the ridiculous, center-parted hair, and removed her sunglasses, placing them elegantly on the table. The anger on her face melted away, replaced by a seductive curve of her lips. A radiant smile bloomed in her eyes as she gazed at Max Dillon, saying nothing. A little bewildered, Max Dillon straightened himself, resuming his usual arrogant playboy demeanor. He flashed what he considered a suave smile. So, what do you think? Don't worry, my bro is a totally great guy. Yet the beauty remained silent, merely glancing at him, her smile widening, taking on an enigmatic quality. Harry Osborn spun around, glaring at Max Dillon before his gaze landed on the beautiful woman. But for some reason, upon seeing her radiant smile, a sense of unease settled over him, sending a chill down his spine. Despite this, he kept his mouth shut. Just then, the beauty slowly opened her handbag, pulled out a fruit knife, slammed it onto the table in front of Osborn with a loud clack, and her smile vanished, replaced by a furious expression. Gritting her teeth, she spat out, "If you want to die, just say it." Max Dillon was instantly at a loss, awkwardly eyeing the fruit knife in front of her. After a long hesitation, he patted his rear, returned to his previous seat, spread his hands helplessly, and said, "Brother Harry, this approach doesn't seem to be working." "Shut up." Harry Osborn snapped at him, then glanced at the beauty at the next table. He saw that she had finally put away the fruit knife, and the faint smile had returned to her face, though a dark anger now smoldered in her eyes. A wave of exasperation washed over him. Damn, he thought, women these days are so fiery, from his childhood sweetheart turned fiancée to the Ferrari-driving woman at the university gate, and now this hot-tempered beauty beside him, none of them seemed normal. "Brother Harry, what time is it? I don't think your fiancée is coming." Max Dillon, still embarrassed from his earlier failed attempt, quickly changed the subject. "What do you think she's like now, after 20 years? What else could she be like? Think about her temper back then, I bet she's like a tigress now. Probably a total shrew. I doubt any man could stand her, she's probably unmarriageable. Why else would my future father-in-law be so desperate to foist her off on me?" Just mentioning her filled Harry Osborn with resentment, his expression twisting into something uglier than tears. He ground out, "Honestly, I can just imagine her now, a total man-eating demon, hot-tempered, unreasonable, and tyrannical." He finished with a sigh, Mary Jane Watson, why didn't you just change your name to She-Hulk? What a waste of a good name." But before he could finish his thought, he noticed the beauty beside him had suddenly turned pale, glaring at him, her teeth grinding together. Before Harry Osborn could react, she shot up from her seat, her high heels clicking against the floor as she strode towards him. Without a word, she stomped on his instep. Arg! A blood-curdling shriek, like a pig being slaughtered, echoed through the café, so piercing and mournful it nearly lifted the roof. The chandelier above swayed precariously. And at that very moment, the few couples in the café, along with the two waitresses, simultaneously turned their heads, staring blankly at the scene unfolding before them. Even Max Dillon, in that instant, was dumbfounded, his mouth agape and speechless, as if he had just swallowed 2 rotten duck eggs. Harry Osborn jolted, a sharp pain in his foot nearly making him faint. He quickly scrambled up from his chair, hopping on one foot while clutching his injured foot, and glared furiously at the peculiar woman, yelling, "Are you crazy? Why did you step on my foot? What rotten luck. Just peacefully enjoying a coffee and then encountering such an aggressive woman." The beautiful woman continued to glare at him, her eyes murderous, chest heaving, teeth gritted. In that moment, the café fell completely silent, not a single sound uttered. Harry Osborn stared intently at the woman, refusing to back down, the atmosphere growing thick with tension, the air itself seeming to solidify. Harry Osborn's face was grim. While he couldn't deny that she was a beauty that any man would find hard to resist, that didn't give her the right to bully him. Rage surged within him, his lungs feeling like they were about to burst. He was just sitting there, minding his own business, waiting for someone, and this woman had barged over and now his foot was throbbing red. Who could he complain to? He was wearing flip-flops, his foot exposed, while she was wearing high heels. The two of them were locked in a stalemate, neither willing to yield, the scent of gunpowder hanging in the air. About 30 seconds later, the beautiful woman's expression suddenly changed. The anger vanished, replaced by a radiant smile that, combined with her stunningly fair face, resembled a blossoming lily. But in that moment, Harry Osborn saw a flicker of something strange in the woman's eyes. A chill ran down his spine, a sense of unease washing over him, but he continued to glare at her. However, the next scene nearly sent Harry Osborn tumbling to the ground. The woman's smile grew wider and wider, yet increasingly bizarre. A moment later, a look of remorse appeared on her face, and she said softly, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was in a bit of a hurry and didn't notice your foot was there." Harry Osborn felt a surge of frustration, veins bulging on his forehead and arms. This woman lied without a second thought, her face not even flushing. Her expression changed faster than the pages of a flipping book. He wasn't sitting in the aisle. He had clearly seen her charge over from where she was sitting, stepping directly onto his foot. Now she was denying it, trying to dismiss it with a simple, "Didn't notice your foot was there." Before he could retort, the woman flashed an innocent smile, batting her eyelashes at him and saying innocently, "Did I hurt you? Here, let me see." As soon as she finished speaking, she bent down, as if genuinely wanting to examine his foot. But with this movement, she accidentally knocked over the coffee cup on the table, spilling the coffee directly onto his lap. Ouch! In a flash, a searing pain shot through his knee, leaving Harry Osborn stunned and wincing, sweat beading on his back. The coffee, though served moments ago, was still scalding, burning his thigh on impact. "Sorry, sorry," the woman exclaimed, flustered, patting his thigh reflexively through his shorts, her fingers pinching him under the guise of comforting pats. A sharp, stinging pain, worse than the coffee burn, jolted Harry Osborn. Looking down, he saw the woman, a smug, fox-like grin on her face, clearly relishing her little scheme. "You did that on purpose?" Harry Osborn roared, enduring the dual agony in his foot and thigh. He'd have to be a fool not to realize her intention now. The simmering anger within him ignited into a raging inferno. "Why are you saying that to me? I clearly apologized." The woman seemed to have brushed aside his anger, the smug smile on her face disappeared, replaced by an innocent and naive expression, even a little aggrieved. She spoke in a low voice. But in her eyes, the smugness and cunning intensified, her cheeks flushed with suppressed laughter. That was the last straw. Harry Osborn snapped. "Looks like I need to teach you a lesson," he snarled. "You think I'm easy prey?" Without another word, he scooped her up, hoisting her slender frame over his shoulder and strode out of the cafe. "Damn it, I don't usually lay hands on women, but I'm not letting some scheming hussy walk all over me." Chapter 12, Call Me Teacher Lamb. The woman's smugness vanished, replaced by stark terror. Her face paled as she struggled and shrieked, "Put me down." But Harry Osborn, consumed by rage, ignored her, carrying her out as she squirmed uselessly in his grip. The cafe's patrons gaped at the spectacle. Two indignant young men jumped up, ready to play the hero, but were restrained by their girlfriends. Max Dillon's jaw dropped, his face alight with admiration. He stared after Harry Osborn, giving him a thumbs up. "That's the brother Harry I know," he muttered, "gotta be firm with women. Just carry her home and make her your wife." As if afraid to miss the unfolding drama, he scrambled after them, losing a slipper in his haste. "Bastard! Let me go, or you'll regret it." The woman's face was even more frightened, but more than that, anger and shame. She struggled with all her might on his shoulder, shouting loudly, her face pale, "If you dare do anything, do you believe I'll kill you? I'd really like to see how you'll make me regret it." Harry Osborn, still angry and frustrated, replied, his footsteps not stopping. "Damn it, I've been having a string of bad luck lately. Just coming to register, and in less than 2 hours, 2 women have threatened to kill me. Looks like I need to find some time to go burn incense and pray to Buddha." However, the only thing that made him sigh inwardly was that he didn't expect this woman, although not fat, to be so soft and boneless. Carrying her on his shoulder, he only felt a soft patch, and her whole body was as light as a feather. "Pervert! I'll kill you." And at this moment, the woman seemed to quickly sense the small action of this bastard's hand. Her face suddenly flushed with shame, as if about to cry, she angrily shouted, struggling even more violently. But how could she when this man's hands were firmly pressed against her buttocks and thighs, like 2 iron tongs, holding tight? No matter how she struggled, she couldn't do anything. "You want to kill me? Oh my, I'm so scared." Harry Osborn's face was still very ugly, a hint of contempt rising. He continued fiercely, "If I don't teach you a lesson today, you'll think this young master is easy to bully. Weren't you very arrogant just now?" As he spoke, he walked straight to the door of the cafe, without saying a word, squatted down, directly pressed the woman onto his knee, making her lie face down on his thigh, raised his hand and was about to hit her. Max Dillon still stood still, looking at Harry Osborn's aggressive appearance, his eyes full of adoration, like a surging river. "You dare! I'll make you regret it." The woman immediately realized what this man wanted to do, her face even more horrified, flushed with anger, she screamed, struggling violently, but to no avail. At this moment, the wild, mature, noble, and elegant aura she had before was gone, replaced by a frightened little woman. Harry Osborn had become deaf to these threats. "I'll kill you, I'll make you regret it, I'll make you pay." He was already immune. After all, he had been threatened like this countless times over the years, and he was still alive and well. So, he directly ignored the woman's anger. Moreover, the anger in his heart was still burning, so he didn't care so much. Without saying a word, his hand swung down. "Harry Osborn, you dare!" Suddenly, the woman screamed again. Immediately, Harry Osborn was completely stunned, stiffly withdrawing his hand, staring blankly at the woman he was pressing on his knee, his mind dizzy. After a while, he stammered, "How do you know my name?" The woman, finally breathing a sigh of relief, scrambled out of his embrace and backed away 2 steps, warily eyeing him. Her face, previously pale, now flushed crimson like a ripe apple, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Clenching her small fists, she gritted her teeth and hissed, "You bastard!" Despite her fury, she quickly fished a thumb-sized plastic rose from her pocket and thrust it at Harry Osborn, glaring at him fiercely. Oof! In that instant, Harry Osborn felt the world go dark. He nearly collapsed, his mind blank, his eyes threatening to pop out of his head. At this moment, he was blissfully unaware that the woman before him was his fiancée, Mary Jane Watson, the same Mary Jane Watson who, 20 years prior, had chased him naked through the streets, leaving a scar on his psyche. He was, indeed, a clueless dolt. He had to admit, the chubby, rosy-cheeked, snot-nosed brat of his memory was now stunningly beautiful. This completely contradicted the image he'd conjured, barrel-waisted, elephant-legged, and with a face like a tiger. He was momentarily disoriented, completely caught off guard. Bloody hell! He'd just manhandled her out of a cafe and nearly given her a thrashing. The thought sent shivers down his spine, a cold sweat breaking out on his back. But the real kicker? This woman was his homeroom teacher for the upcoming year. Max Dillon, who had been standing beside him, observing Harry Osborn with an awestruck expression, was equally dumbfounded. His admiration vanished, replaced by a fluctuating complexion, as if he'd swallowed a rotten duck egg. After a long pause, he lunged towards Mary Jane Watson, a fawning, yet slightly trembling smile plastered on his face. He stammered, "Sis. Sister-in-law. Who's your sister-in-law? Mary Jane Watson retorted, her face flushed, glaring at him. Well, this. Max Dillon hastily clamped his mouth shut, his face burning. He stammered a hasty excuse, you two chat. I, have to go. He then cast a mournful, helpless glance at Harry Osborn. Brother Harry, you're on your own. With that, he bolted towards the street, his movements frantic, quickly hailing a taxi and vanishing from sight. Bastard! Watching the scoundrel disappear, Harry Osborn felt a mixture of helplessness and contempt. The guy ran faster than a rabbit when trouble brewed. After a long moment, he forced a laugh and turned back to Mary Jane Watson, who was still standing there. He grinned, a grimace more unsettling than tears. Well, I'll be. Mary Jane Watson. Long time no see, long time no see. Call me Ms. Lamb, Mary Jane Watson stated flatly, each word precise. A faint blush lingered on her cheeks, perhaps a residue of the humiliation from being manhandled and nearly assaulted. A flicker of shame crossed her eyes. What? Harry Osborn nearly jumped out of his skin, his forehead throbbing with blue veins. He glared at her, speechless with indignation. Damn it! This woman was his fiancée, yet she wanted him to call her Ms. Lamb. It felt like a subtle power play, a small victory for her. Plus, I'm only 2 years younger than her, yet I have to call her teacher, it just feels weird. So. Don't forget your student status. You'd better show some respect to your teacher from now on. Mary Jane Watson, no longer tense and embarrassed, quickly regained her smug grin. Her eyes, gleaming with a mischievous glint of a successful prank, held a subtle, eerie quality as she spoke casually. Mary Jane Watson. Harry Osborn roared, unable to contain himself any longer. Fury surged within him, his blood boiling. I don't want a student who disrespects their teacher. Mary Jane Watson seemed completely oblivious to his anger. With a disdainful sneer, she crossed her arms and spoke sternly, a cunning, fox-like glint in her eyes. Don't try to pull the teacher card on me. Don't forget how you became my teacher in the first place. Respect my teacher. I'll show you what respecting a teacher means today. Harry Osborn, unable to contain his rage, gritted his teeth and growled. Without another word, he strode towards her, intending to scoop her up. Chapter 13, She's still as arrogant as ever. Seeing Harry Osborn about to lift her, Mary Jane Watson's face paled. She cried out in alarm, You dare? Is there anything I wouldn't dare? Harry Osborn snarled, grabbing her hand without another word and hoisting her into his arms. Damn it, if I don't teach her a lesson, won't this little minx eat me alive later? Wait. Just then, Mary Jane Watson yelled again, unexpectedly pulling out her phone and quickly dialing a number. Harry Osborn froze, unsure what she was up to, but reflexively put her down. He stared at her blankly, his face grim. Now he understood, this girl was definitely not someone to be trifled with. Uncle Osborn, seeing that Harry Osborn had released her, Mary Jane Watson's expression softened slightly, though a hint of flush and embarrassment remained. She shot him a glare before breaking into a radiant, charming smile as she spoke sweetly into the phone. Harry Osborn was completely dumbfounded, gawking at her. The tension from earlier was gone, replaced by a cunning, sly glint in her eyes. She looked at him with a knowing smirk, the picture of triumphant confidence, as she continued her saccharine phone conversation. Uncle Osborn, I found the jerk. I found Harry Osborn. But there's something I don't understand. He was just at the cafe, and he saw a pretty girl and ran over to hit on her. He even said he wanted to take her home and have a bunch of sons with her. As she finished speaking, her smile widened. Without another word, she shoved the phone into Harry Osborn's hand and shrugged nonchalantly. Uncle Osborn wants to talk to you. Harry Osborn wanted to die. Glaring at the devious woman, he hesitantly took the phone and cautiously said, "Father, you little brat, do you want to die? If you want to die, get back here." Before he could explain, a thunderous roar erupted from the other end of the phone. Harry Osborn jumped, nearly dropping the phone in fright, and quickly hung up. Looking back at this woman, his face paled, the veins in his arms throbbing. Damn, this woman was truly formidable. She had already mastered the art of running home and tattling to his old man. Fury ignited within Harry Osborn, his teeth grinding, eyes blazing. But Mary Jane Watson, upon seeing his rage, only smiled wider, a sneer twisting her lips. Like a goblin gnawing a bone, never letting go, she taunted. "I forgot to mention, my relationship with your Uncle Osborn has always been excellent." Mary Jane Watson. Harry Osborn roared, veins bulging on his forehead, teeth clenched. "Call me Professor Lamb." Mary Jane Watson dismissed his anger, her disdain deepening. She crossed her arms, coolly donned her sunglasses, and turned towards a silver Mercedes-Benz. With a flourish, she opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. Just as she was about to close the door, she glanced back at him, taking in his appearance and the large suitcase beside him. "Are you getting in? Though I really dislike sharing space with a jerk like you." Harry Osborn stared at her fierce expression, inwardly groaning, wishing he could find a tofu block to bash his head against. Before encountering her, he'd held a sliver of hope that after 20 years, her fiery, domineering personality might have softened. After all, she was a renowned university professor, surely, she'd have acquired some grace and gentleness. Now, he understood the truth of the saying, a leopard cannot change its spots. 20 years had passed, and she was still as sharp-tongued and overbearing as ever. The thought of living under the same roof with this woman for a year, with her holding leverage over him, ready to tattle to his father, filled him with dread. How could he possibly have any peace? "Harry Osborn, you're regressing. Reduced to being bullied by a woman." The thought made him want to die. He looked up at her, comfortably seated in the driver's seat, a smug smile playing on her lips, her aura radiating wild, untamed energy. The sunglasses hit her eyes, but Harry could imagine them gleaming with triumph. This wasn't a renowned university professor, this was a cunning imp who'd just gotten her way, devoid of any professorial grace or gentleness. His anger flared anew, his face darkening. Gritting his teeth, he picked up his suitcase, strode to the car, shoved it into the trunk, and wordlessly climbed into the passenger seat. He turned his face away, refusing to acknowledge the woman who'd just scored a victory, her metaphorical tail practically wagging. He let out a cold huff, his resentment simmering. "Don't feel so aggrieved. I'm your teacher now, after all. And don't think I'm a snitch just because I occasionally call Uncle Osborn." Mary Jane Watson started the car and pulled away smoothly. Glancing at his sullen face, a glint of cunning and triumph flickered in her eyes, but her voice was serious. "I have the right to inform parents about disobedient students. And, of course, your parent is Uncle Osborn." "Shut up." Harry Osborn, his stomach still churning with unvented fury, didn't want to argue further. He snapped, then paused, a thought seeming to strike him. Turning, he lowered his voice, "I ask you, we agreed to meet today, with a red rose as the sign. Why didn't you follow through?" "Who says I didn't?" Mary Jane Watson's smugness returned, a smirk playing on her lips. "I'm a renowned professor. Students and faculty know me around Tianfu University. You expect me to sit in a cafe with a giant rose like some lovesick fool? I'd lose all credibility. Besides, a red rose on a cafe table? How utterly tacky. You." Harry Osborn was speechless, struck to the core. His face flushed crimson, but he was powerless against her. He glared, words failing him. "Bloody hell, I thought I'd gone from artsy to idiotic, but turns out I was right all along." Turning back, he resentfully assessed her. He saw her now, a stunning face, a perfect figure, but a devil inside. Utterly beyond his ability to handle. And that stubborn, defiant streak? Worse than in their childhood. Best to keep my head down this year. Just survive and escape. Honestly, I don't want to be stripped naked in downtown Shandis City by this woman in my 20s and forced to run a lap. I'd rather die. But the simmering resentment lingered. No amount of self-soothing could quell it. His eyes darted around, an idea sparking. A sly grin spread across his face as he turned back, his gaze raking over the woman calmly driving beside him. Her tight leather skirt, stretched taut against her as she sat, made her look even more perfect, like a sculpture carved from white jade. Her sleek, dark hair flowed down her back, a few strands dancing in the air. Combined with her large sunglasses, it added an air of elegant sophistication. Harry Osborn was momentarily stunned, his mouth agape, drool nearly escaping. "What are you doing?" Mary Jane Watson's smugness faltered. She sensed a shift in him, turning to look at him with a flicker of alarm. "What are you doing?" she repeated, her voice laced with apprehension. Chapter 14, Teacher Lamb's Good Student. "What do you think I'm doing?" Harry Osborn's grin widened at her unease. He licked his lips, a suggestive smirk playing on his face. What else can a man and a woman alone together do? Especially when the woman is a breathtaking beauty like yourself. And I'm no saint. As he spoke, one hand began to move. "Why you, bastard." In an instant, the sly, fox-like smirk vanished from Mary Jane Watson's face, replaced by a tense, apprehensive stare at the man. She shrank back, but retorted defiantly, "Don't forget, I'm your teacher. If you dare try anything. But don't you forget, you're also my fiancée. Not that I'm thrilled about marrying you, but I'm sure my grandmother and your father would be overjoyed if I took a few liberties, even if something happened between us." Harry Osborn's smile twisted into a more malicious, condescending sneer before he clicked his tongue. "In fact, I encourage you to call your old man and tell him. I'm sure he's so eager for grandchildren, he'll probably commend me." Watching her flustered, apprehensive expression, her cheeks flushed crimson, the frustration he'd felt moments before finally dissipated, leaving him feeling so exhilarated he almost wanted to set off fireworks. "You, get your filthy hands off me." Utterly defeated, Mary Jane Watson's face turned an ashen green. Gnashing her teeth, she spat out the words, her eyes blazing, then slammed on the brakes of her Mercedes, bringing it to a screeching halt. Without another word, she yanked the car door handle, intending to bolt, but Harry Osborn's hand shot out, gripping her arm, preventing her escape. "I'll kill you." Humiliated, Mary Jane Watson's face burned with rage, the sly, vixen-like demeanor gone, replaced by a furious snarl. But Harry Osborn wasn't about to back down. Damn it, if he didn't teach this woman a lesson today, she'd really think he was a pushover. Just then, a sharp pain shot through his side. Harry Osborn looked down to see the woman's hand on his waist, pinching and twisting a chunk of flesh like she was tuning an old black-and-white TV, rotating it a full 180 degrees. Agony surged through Harry Osborn, nearly making him black out. A cold sweat slicked his back as his movements abruptly ceased. He stared at her, stunned. Her face remained ashen, her chest heaving, eyes blazing as she glared at him, teeth clenched in a furious grimace. "You lecherous pig. If you try anything again, don't blame me for being unkind. Damn it." Harry Osborn's smugness evaporated, replaced by a furious scowl. "Why do you always resort to pinching?" he roared. "Serves you right, you jerk." Mary Jane Watson glared at him, seething. "Serves me right?" Her words only fueled Harry Osborn's rage. His face darkened ominously. "Today, I'll show you who deserves what. You're my fiancée, after all. Might as well make this official. It'll please both our families." No sooner had he spoken than he leaned forward, without a word, and scooped the woman up around the waist, intending to pull her close. Ah, let go. In that instant, Mary Jane Watson's face paled in fright. She couldn't help but cry out, struggling mightily to break free. But the man seemed determined, his grip on her waist remaining firm. Yet, just as Harry Osborn was about to pull her in tight, a flash of white light blinded him momentarily. When his vision cleared, he saw that the woman in his arms, as if by magic, now held a small paring knife, the very same one that had terrified Max Dillon into wetting himself back at the cafe. The tiny paring knife was pointed directly at his stomach. He looked at the woman, her face a mask of menace, teeth gritted as she hissed, "Try to move a muscle, and I'll geld you." This woman, as fierce as ever. In that moment, all Harry Osborn's anger dissipated. He stared at this fierce woman, utterly speechless, feeling a deep sense of injustice, wishing he could find a noodle to hang himself with. Damn it, he'd mustered all his courage for that move, hoping to seize the initiative and knock her down a peg. He figured it was the only way to ensure a peaceful coexistence under the same roof. What he hadn't anticipated was that this woman would be so difficult to handle. She was just a girl, yet she carried a paring knife around for some unfathomable reason. It finally dawned on him, he was no match for this woman 20 years ago, and he still wasn't now. When it came to sheer stubbornness, he was outclassed, and the fact that his old man had her back made things even worse. It seemed he was destined to spend the next year living a life devoid of dignity, a dark, hellish existence. The thought almost brought Harry Osborn to tears. His eyebrows furrowed into two tight knots, feeling as violated as a country bumpkin groped by some random pervert. He looked at the woman, at the paring knife in her hand, his face a picture of utter defeat. Finally, he surrendered. "I suggest you behave yourself for the next year. Or don't blame me for what happens." Seeing Harry Osborn's dejected expression, Mary Jane Watson finally relaxed, but she continued to glare at him icily. "I'm your homeroom teacher, after all. If you dare disrespect your teacher, humph." Though she left the sentence unfinished, the threat was clear. Utterly defeated, Harry Osborn stared listlessly at her for a long moment before finally managing to squeeze out, "Understood, Teacher Lamb." "Good boy." Hearing his submission, Mary Jane Watson's anger vanished. She curled her lip disdainfully, a mischievous curve forming at the corner of her mouth as she uttered the two words. She almost patted Harry Osborn on the head like a little dog. A blush crept up her face, shy and delicate, almost teary, as if remembering she was still this jerk's fiancée. But stronger still, a smug, cunning glint appeared, transforming her into a man-eating sorceress. Harry Osborn ignored her, turning to the window, silently watching the passing scenery. Mary Jane Watson started the car and sped off. For a while, neither spoke, but their expressions presented a stark contrast. Mary Jane Watson seemed in high spirits, humming as she drove, a faint smile playing on her lips, her gaze fixed ahead, a few strands of black hair dancing freely in the wind. Beside her, the man wore a tragicomic expression, forehead creased with frustration, yet seemingly resigned to the woman's overbearing nature, occasionally letting out a cold huff, devoid of any real menace. Although a teacher at Tianfu University, Mary Jane Watson didn't live in the faculty housing. Instead, she owned an apartment not far from the university, located in the most luxurious area of downtown Shanda City. Both the scale and class of the apartment complex were impressive, indicating that only wealthy families with considerable financial resources could afford to live in this expensive part of the city. Surprised by her apparent wealth, Harry Osborn wondered if it came from extorting students or accepting gifts from parents. He glanced at her, appraising the humming woman from head to toe, his suspicion growing. With her domineering personality, he figured she was certainly capable of such things. Without hesitation, he shot her a look of disdain. "What are you thinking? This was bought with my salary, bonuses, and prize money from some papers I published over the past 2 years." Mary Jane Watson, reading his mind, snapped, glaring at him. Harry Osborn shut his mouth, staring at her dumbfounded. Good heavens, he hadn't even said anything. Could she read minds? Freaky. Chapter 15. Delight. Mary Jane Watson's apartment was on the 10th floor of the central building in the complex, the best location, the best floor. 3 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, a spacious 130 square meters, bright and airy. The furnishings, while not as extravagant as those in a wealthy mansion, were tasteful and elegant. The dominant beige color, from the furniture to the wallpaper and wall decorations, created a harmonious atmosphere. Harry Osborn sullenly dragged his suitcase, dropping it with a thud before slumping onto the sofa. He surveyed the apartment, inwardly impressed by the ferocious airhead's surprisingly refined taste. But the thought of living here with her for a whole year made his head ache. Mary Jane Watson, seemingly indifferent, pointed towards a water dispenser in the corner. "Get your own water if you want some," she said, before returning to her room. She emerged shortly after, having changed into a different outfit. Dark blue skinny jeans accentuated her long, slender legs, paired with a loose-fitting, off-the-shoulder, light green sweater that revealed a flash of pale skin. If the tight leather skirt and thin turtleneck sweater at the cafe had made her appear cold and arrogant, now she exuded a wild, mature aura. For a moment, Harry Osborn was captivated. The snot-nosed, chubby 6 or 7-year-old brat had blossomed into such a stunning beauty, catching Harry Osborn off guard. But the memory of her fierce and unruly temper sent a shiver down his spine. "What are you looking at?" Mary Jane Watson's sharp eyes caught Harry Osborn staring. She glared, snorted, and plopped down opposite him, thrusting a piece of paper at him. "What's this?" Harry Osborn hesitated, accepting the paper. His eyes scanned the contents, and his veins bulged on his forehead. "I believe we both understand that this marriage is forced upon us." Mary Jane Watson's face remained calm. She shrugged indifferently, poured herself a cup of coffee, took a graceful sip, and continued, "You don't want to get married this early, and I never thought I'd marry you, a student." Harry Osborn nodded slightly, offering no rebuttal. The woman had finally uttered something sensible, though the "I never thought I'd marry you, a student" part stung. His earlier argument with her in the car had ended in his utter defeat, leaving him with no courage to argue now. "You can't sway Mr. Osborn, and I can't sway my father, hence this situation." Mary Jane Watson continued. "This means, despite being forced by our parents, we have to live together for a year. However, I'm your teacher, and a woman, living with a punk like you is inconvenient, so there need to be rules. This is an agreement, if you have no objections, we'll both sign it." "Don't call me a punk." Harry Osborn finally snapped, his voice low. Damn it, this woman was always attacking him personally. "You are a punk, aren't you?" Mary Jane Watson dismissed his anger and discontent, glaring at him. "The first time you saw me at the cafe, before even knowing who I was, you thought about carrying me home and having a bunch of sons. If that's not punk, what is?" A slight blush crept onto Mary Jane Watson's face. "That was Max Dillon, that bastard, putting me up to it." Harry Osborn felt helpless, cursing Max Dillon under his breath. Damn him, always causing trouble. All right. All right. I admit it. But what about in the car just now? Where were your wandering hands touching? Where were your shifty eyes looking? Mary Jane Watson's face grew even redder, followed by another cold snort, her teeth gritted as she spoke, a murderous aura creeping into her voice. "Well, you're my fiancée, aren't you? Can't I even touch you? Can't I even look? It's not like I'm taking a chunk out of you." In an instant, Harry Osborn's anger dissipated, his face flushing slightly as he muttered under his breath. "Shut up." But upon hearing this, Mary Jane Watson's expression suddenly darkened, turning pale as she seemed to recall how this jerk had nearly smacked her backside earlier. Her face hardened with fury as she gritted her teeth and snapped, "If you dare to be disrespectful again, don't blame me for being unkind. I'd like to see how unkind you can be." Harry Osborn's temper flared in response, his eyes locking with hers, unflinching. A sarcastic smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Aren't you best at running to my old man to tattle? Go ahead, tell him I wanted to grope you. See if he'll give me a thrashing. Is that so?" Mary Jane Watson wasn't backing down either. The air crackled with tension. Without another word, she pulled out her phone as if to make a call, but after a long hesitation, she finally restrained herself, only spitting out, "You shameless scoundrel." Having achieved a small victory, Harry Osborn's mood improved considerably. He felt the air around him grow lighter, fresher. "I'll let this slide for now. We should discuss the agreement," Mary Jane Watson said through gritted teeth. "First, although we're engaged due to family arrangements, we must keep this relationship secret. If you dare to reveal it, don't blame me for what happens." She added irritably, "If people knew I had such a good-for-nothing fiancé as you, I'd die of embarrassment." "You." Harry Osborn's anger surged again. His eyes burned as he glared at her. Damn it, why did this woman have to be so subtly insulting? But Mary Jane Watson completely ignored him, leaving him to fume. "Don't worry," he retorted, "I'm just as eager to keep our relationship under wraps." "All right, second, although our parents want us to live together and develop feelings, I'm warning you, don't you dare fall for me," Mary Jane Watson stated seriously. "For this year, I just want to get by peacefully. I'm not thinking about marriage at all. I'm more worried you'll accidentally fall for me." Harry Osborn readily agreed, not having any objections to this point. "Fall for you? In your dreams?" Mary Jane Watson scoffed, looking down at his shorts and flip-flops with disdain. But then something seemed to occur to her. "No. We need a strict rule to prevent unnecessary complications later. Whoever falls for the other has to bark like a dog and crawl around the campus." "You're ruthless." "Fine." Harry Osborn gritted his teeth, agreeing without another word, finding this point surprisingly agreeable. "Also, without my permission, you're not allowed to enter my room. Furthermore, no physical contact is permitted, like what happened in the car." "I won't allow it again." Mary Jane Watson nodded, satisfied, before continuing. "Consider this, a young man and woman living under the same roof. What if I can't resist touching you?" Harry Osborn pondered for a moment, then asked in a low voice, "Frankly, I'm a traditional man." "In your dreams?" Mary Jane Watson's voice hardened instantly, her eyes blazing as she glared at him. "A scoundrel who just days ago rented a hotel room with the mayor's daughter in America dares to call himself traditional?" In an instant, Harry Osborn's confidence plummeted. He cursed this woman through gritted teeth, yet felt powerless. "Damn it, why am I so spineless? Just days ago, I signed a bunch of unequal treaties with my old man and old lady back home, and now I'm stuck signing another one with this woman." Under her pressure, they established further terms. He must address her as teacher at school, both have the freedom to date without interference, and Harry Osborn cannot bring strange women home. To add a touch of Osbornian intimidation, Mary Jane Watson insisted on a final clause: any violation results in a month of housework and barking and mooing like an animal across the schoolyard. Harry Osborn seethed inwardly, longing to teach this woman a lesson, to bend her over the sofa and spank her until she learned obedience. But he wasn't in the mood for a fight. Glancing over the contract, he found it manageable and readily agreed. After all, his greatest hope was to lie low for a year, regain his freedom, and reclaim his own personal jungle. With that in mind, he grabbed the pre-written contract, signed it, and arrogantly shook her hand, saying, "Happy cohabitation." Just then, a strange smile crept across Mary Jane Watson's face. Clutching the contract, she rubbed her stomach and calmly said, "I'm a bit hungry. Go cook." "What?" Before she finished, Harry Osborn shot up from the sofa, glaring at her indignantly. "On what grounds?" he roared. "Because I'm hungry." Mary Jane Watson ignored his anger, curling her lip dismissively. Her smile widened, like a predatory succubus, as she spoke again. On what grounds are you making me cook? I'm not your nanny, and it's not in the contract. Harry Osborn fumed, his lungs about to burst, thinking this woman was utterly unreasonable and outrageous. But the next scene nearly made him faint and fall flat on his face. The woman feigned sudden realization, letting out an "oh," leisurely opened the contract, scrutinized it, and then continued, "It seems like there isn't such a clause. But it's not too late to add it now." As she spoke, she grabbed the pen in front of her, added a sentence to the contract, then smugly held it up in front of him, giggling with increasing cunning and slyness in her eyes. Mary Jane Watson. In an instant, Harry Osborn's fury ignited, veins bulging on his forehead and pulsing in his arms. He roared, striding towards her. Bloody hell, he was the heir to Osborn Group, yet he was being played by this petty woman. If this got out, how could he ever show his face again? It seemed he had to teach her a lesson today, or she'd really think she was a teacher and had him wrapped around her finger. What are you doing? Mary Jane Watson, momentarily startled, quickly tucked the contract into her bag and asked cautiously. What am I doing? You dare ask? I'm going all out today. Looks like I need to teach you a lesson, or you'll think I'm easy to bully. Harry Osborn, face still pale, charged forward and scooped her up from the sofa. Ah, put me down. Mary Jane Watson, no longer able to maintain her composure, cried out in alarm, her face paling as she struggled. Chapter 16, Careful, I'll bite you to death, scared now. Weren't you quite cocky just now? Harry Osborn, without a word, held her, plopped onto the sofa, and flipped her over. Bastard, I'll kill you. Mary Jane Watson instantly realized what he was planning, her pale face flushing crimson, as if about to bleed. She couldn't help but yell. Her body thrashed, but the man seemed genuinely enraged, his filthy hand planted on her thigh, her struggles futile. Mary Jane Watson's fury intensified, her eyes blazing. If looks could kill, this bastard would have died 9,981 times. She was so enraged she wanted to grab a cleaver from the kitchen, chop him to bits, sprinkle him with salt and pepper, and deep fry him. But now, pinned beneath him, completely immobilized, in desperation, she shrieked, You bastard, I'm your teacher. How dare you? Teacher my ass. When did I ever treat you like a teacher? Before she could finish, Harry Osborn roared again, his hand raised, and without hesitation, he spanked her. In a flash, a smack echoed through the air, his large hand, neither heavy nor light, delivering a strangely burning sensation. Mary Jane Watson, utterly speechless, whipped her head around, glaring at Harry Osborn. Her face flushed crimson, like a ripe apple, cheeks puffed out in a furious expression, resembling a lioness on the verge of a rampage. Mary Jane Watson continued to glare at him, teeth clenched around her lower lip, not uttering a word. Her eyes widened, as if internally cursing this scoundrel from head to toe, wishing boils upon him. Harry Osborn, inwardly gloating, contemplated buying some firecrackers to celebrate. In his struggle with this woman, he had finally achieved a small victory. After a long while, his hand began to numb. Turning, he saw tears welling in Mary Jane Watson's eyes. She bit her lip, fighting back the tears, her face still flushed, as if never before so humiliated. Harry Osborn panicked slightly, genuinely afraid of her tears. He feared nothing more than a crying woman. Reluctantly, he ceased his actions, wordlessly pulling her into his arms and seating her on the sofa. Grumbling, he muttered, Who told you to be so unreasonable? Bastard! Mary Jane Watson hissed, seemingly hesitant, sniffling with tears brimming in her eyes. The fierce, unreasonable, domineering tigress was gone, replaced by a small, aggrieved woman. Serves you right. Be unreasonable again, and I'll hit you more. Despite her pitiful, angry appearance softening his heart, Harry Osborn grumbled. You dare. Mary Jane Watson snarled, her chest heaving, his words rekindling her fury. Her flushed face turned pale. She clenched her small fists, her rage fully ignited. Before Harry Osborn could react, with surprising strength, like a hunting lioness, she sprang from the sofa, pouncing on him and biting his arm without a word. Ack! A blood-curdling shriek, like a stuck pig, filled the living room. Dust rained from the walls, and ripples disturbed the still water in the teacup on the table. A searing pain shot through Harry Osborn's arm, nearly making him faint. Cold sweat poured down his back, his heart pounding in his throat. He turned sharply to see Mary Jane Watson still glaring furiously, lips pursed, ample chest heaving, the corner of her mouth twisted in lingering anger. That look, that expression, it's a good thing this woman didn't take a bite out of him, or she would have swallowed him whole and licked the blood from the corner of her mouth. You! In an instant, Harry Osborn's smugness vanished, replaced by anger and resentment. He glared at the woman, speechless, rubbing the clear bite mark on his arm. This woman, she hadn't changed a bit in 20 years. Still quick to resort to violence, just as fierce as ever, maybe even more so. Serves you right. Next time you try anything with me, I'll bite you to death. Mary Jane Watson retorted, a flash of arrogance in her eyes as she puffed out her chest and spoke fiercely. Are you a dog in human skin? You bite at the slightest provocation. Harry Osborn muttered, glaring at her, feeling utterly helpless. I am a dog, what are you going to do about it? Before he could finish, Mary Jane Watson roared, then, realizing what she'd said, flushed crimson. You're the dog, she shrieked. As she spoke, seemingly unable to bear the embarrassment any longer, she jumped up and ran to a nearby chair. From her bag, she snatched the small fruit knife she'd used to threaten him earlier, then stormed back, brandishing it. I'll let you off this time. We'll settle the score later. Now go cook. Why? Harry Osborn stubbornly turned his head away, his voice firm. Because of this knife. And this agreement. Mary Jane Watson gritted her teeth, waving the document in front of him menacingly. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Harry Osborn remembered something, his face flushing. He shot up from the sofa. Why do you have the agreement and I don't? Shouldn't there be 2 copies, he demanded. Because from now on, in this house, you only have obligations, not rights. The embarrassment on Mary Jane Watson's face faded, replaced by a smug smirk. So there, she added with disdain. You. Harry Osborn was speechless. Fury surged through him, and he lunged forward, ready to give this woman a piece of his mind. His parents were bad enough, but at least after signing that unequal treaty, they'd let him keep a copy. This woman, she held all the cards. He had no recourse, and she could probably add whatever unfair clauses she wanted. To think that a brilliant mind like his, Harry Osborn's, had been outmaneuvered by this woman. That ferocious, silly girl, still as ferocious as ever. Go cook. Before he could make a move, Mary Jane Watson stepped forward, the small knife pointed at his stomach, her eyes threatening. Now, she yelled again. In a flash, Harry Osborn was utterly powerless, his face turning purple as he stared at this woman. He floundered for a long time, unable to utter a word. His eyebrows furrowed like 2 large caterpillars, a feeling of frustration washing over him, making him feel like a small, wronged bride. Glaring at her, teeth gritted, for a full 10 seconds, Harry Osborn finally let out a helpless sigh and turned towards the kitchen. Chapter 17, Mary Jane Watson, you win this round. At this moment, Harry Osborn's heart was filled with immense suffering, wishing he could grab a kitchen knife, chop off his own head, and deep-fry it in a pan of hot oil. Forced to become a student at Tianfu University, forced to live with this fiancée/teacher, unable to defy his old man and grandma back home, he could only silently endure. But this woman, who had been a psychological shadow for Harry Osborn since childhood, was no easy opponent. She had him completely under her thumb. He had planned to find an opportunity to muster his courage, teach this woman a lesson, and quell her fierceness so he could live in peace, but unexpectedly, everything had backfired. It seemed that if he wanted to live comfortably, to survive this year and finally be free, he would have to engage in a fierce struggle with this woman. What an arduous battle it would be. Meanwhile, Mary Jane Watson stared at the dejected back of this man, the tension she had felt finally easing. She plopped down on the sofa, letting out an involuntary sigh of relief. Immediately after, a radiant smile bloomed on her face, and a classic cunning glint appeared in her eyes. A playful tremble ran through her, her face lighting up like a flower, the very image of a sly little vixen who had just achieved her wicked scheme. She triumphantly raised a small fist towards the kitchen, gritting her teeth and letting out a cold snort, "You're still too green to mess with me." The wild, mature charm that radiated from her was fully unleashed in this moment. But as if suddenly remembering being spanked over his knee by that bastard, a blush of shame crept up her face, reaching even her ears. She couldn't help but curse that shameless scoundrel from head to toe, that bastard, so disrespectful to his teacher, daring to spank me. If I had known he was so shameless, I would have cried and wailed like my father, refusing their unreasonable demands even if they beat me to death. I'm so furious, so furious. Harry Osborn was quite confident in his cooking skills. Before long, he had prepared 3 simple dishes and a soup, a decent meal in terms of color, aroma, and taste. Mary Jane Watson seemed genuinely hungry, finally ignoring the bastard's previous disrespectful behavior. She rushed to the dining table, grabbed her chopsticks, and began to devour the food. In that instant, Harry Osborn was completely stunned, staring at this woman in a daze. Her eating speed wasn't like other women who chewed carefully and swallowed slowly, counting grains of rice with their chopsticks. Instead, a bowl of rice disappeared into her stomach in less than a few minutes. Yet, her movements weren't the least bit crude, on the contrary, they seemed even more gentle and elegant than those who ate slowly and meticulously. After much deliberation, Harry Osborn still couldn't figure out how this woman managed to combine rapid eating with such elegant manners. A true master, indeed. Even after the meal, Mary Jane Watson showed no intention of giving the scoundrel any pleasantries. While eating the food he prepared, she continued to sniff disdainfully, occasionally glaring at him. The meal ended quickly, but what surprised Harry even more was that after cleaning her plate and wiping her mouth, this woman turned on him, pulling out the contract she'd modified into practically an indentured servitude agreement, and haughtily ordered him to wash the dishes. Utterly defeated, Harry's face turned crimson as he stared at the shrewish woman before him, his teeth grinding. After a long hesitation, he reluctantly hung his head and trudged to the kitchen with the dishes. Though he kept telling himself, a real man doesn't argue with a woman, no amount of self-soothing could quell the rising frustration within him. Half an hour later, finally finished with the kitchen, he returned to the living room to find Mary Jane Watson lounging comfortably on the sofa, snacking on sunflower seeds, sipping coffee, and watching a melodramatic soap opera on TV, the kind so over-the-top and convoluted it wouldn't even fool a preteen. Yet, there she was, eyes glued to the screen, a box of tissues at hand, constantly dabbing at her eyes. Harry was completely dumbfounded. He couldn't comprehend this woman. One moment she was a ferocious tigress, the next she was weeping over the fictional woes of a soap opera character. He pondered this for a while, still baffled, but one thing was certain, this woman defied conventional understanding. He decided to ignore her, grabbed his suitcase from the corner, and headed towards a spare room. Damn it, better make the bed first. A good afternoon nap is in order. Hold on. Just then, Mary Jane Watson abruptly stood up from the sofa, calling out seriously. What? Harry startled, unsure what this woman wanted now. Go shopping with me this afternoon. I need to buy some things. Mary Jane Watson declared, her lip curled in a haughty sneer. What? Harry's head throbbed. He nearly jumped out of his skin, glaring at her. No way. I'm sleeping this afternoon, he refused without hesitation. Damn, the biggest headache in life is shopping with women. He still couldn't understand how so many women could wander around with such enthusiasm, seemingly buying nothing. What a waste of time and energy. Is that so? Mary Jane Watson seemed to have anticipated his reaction. She simply ignored him, crossing her arms and looking at him with a knowing smirk, as if completely confident in her victory. I said I'm not going, and I mean it. I'm very busy this afternoon. Harry Osborn's heart began to pound, but he stood his ground. Fine, if you're not going, then don't. I've never liked forcing anyone to do anything. Mary Jane Watson's smile became even more unsettling. Without another word, she picked up the phone next to her, pretended to press a few buttons, and said, "Hello, Mr. Osborn, how are you? There's something I think I need to." Damn it. In an instant, Harry Osborn was defeated. He lowered his voice and growled, "Mary Jane Watson, you win. That's how it should be." Mary Jane Watson's expression became even more devilish, like a bewitching fox spirit, her whole being radiating a wild, rebellious aura. She curled her lip and said haughtily, turning to walk back to her room. But after taking 2 steps, she muttered to herself, "He's already scared before I even made the call. Seems like this trick still works. Well, I am a gorgeous woman after all. Dragging him out shopping is doing him a huge favor. He's still being picky. How ungrateful." Harry Osborn was utterly helpless, looking at this woman with a tragicomic expression, his teeth grinding together, eyes practically spitting fire. Oh God! My old man back home is practically blind. What kind of fiancée did he arrange for me? Harry Osborn's briefly improved mood plummeted back to rock bottom. He wanted nothing more than to find a noodle to hang himself with. Mary Jane Watson quickly finished getting ready and emerged from her room, a handbag dangling from her wrist. She glanced at Harry Osborn, still wallowing in misery in the living room, snorted, and turned to leave. Harry Osborn, equally helpless, could only hang his head dejectedly and follow, his eyebrows furrowed, his mouth pouting like he could hang 2 bottles of ketchup from it. On the way, Mary Jane Watson drove. She wore tight jeans, a loose, off-the-shoulder sweater, and her hair flowed freely behind her. Large sunglasses covered her face as she hummed a tune while driving leisurely. Harry Osborn, still in his shorts and slippers, sat slumped in the passenger seat, gazing listlessly at the scenery outside the window. His heart was heavy with dread. He occasionally glanced at the demonic woman beside him, letting out a few cold snorts, but his anger had mostly dissipated. What's wrong? Not happy to go shopping with a gorgeous woman like me? Mary Jane Watson seemed to notice his reluctance. She turned her head slightly, giving him a half-smile, and said, "You should know, I've never gone shopping with a man before." "Oh, wait, to be precise, you're still my student." "I'm thrilled. So thrilled I could cry." Harry Osborn glared at her, retorting irritably, then turned his head away, ignoring her. "Hell, if I said I wasn't thrilled, would you be kind enough to take me back?" "Good that you're thrilled. I was feeling a little guilty, but now it seems completely unnecessary." Mary Jane Watson maintained her half-smile. "You." Harry Osborn was momentarily speechless. He could see right through her deliberate taunts. But after grinding his teeth for a long while, he finally succumbed to his helplessness. Anyway, he understood now. Arguing with this woman wouldn't get him anywhere. Harry Osborn promptly gave up on conversation, yawned, and slumped back in his seat, falling asleep. Chapter 18, Professor Lamb's Logic. In his dream, Harry Osborn saw this woman transformed into his personal maid, clad in a short blue dress and bunny ears, diligently and gently doing laundry, folding blankets, pouring tea, attending to his every need, living the life of luxury. But somehow, the obedient maid's image blurred, a wisp of smoke drifted past, and she morphed into a disheveled she-demon, mouth agape like a bloody basin, about to sink her teeth into his neck, seemingly ready to devour him whole. Ah! In an instant, Harry Osborn jolted awake with a yell, scrambling upright. Realizing it was just a dream, his heart calmed slightly. But before he could fully collect himself, a sharp pain shot through his side. Turning, he saw the Mercedes parked in the central square of Shanda City. Mary Jane Watson glared at him, one hand pinching the soft flesh of his waist, uttering curtly, "Nice dream. Get out." Harry Osborn finally came to his senses, rubbing his pinched waist and wiping the drool from the corner of his mouth. He was about to explode when he saw the woman's smug, almost smiling expression, the corner of her mouth slightly upturned, a clear, "I'm your teacher, I've got you" look on her face. Harry Osborn's anger deflated. He listlessly pushed open the car door and stepped out, sighing inwardly. Damn, what bad luck had he run into in this life, to be saddled with a fiancée like this by his old man. Mary Jane Watson ignored his sullen expression. Locking the car, she put on her sunglasses. A warm afternoon breeze ruffled her shoulder-length black hair, which, combined with her loose, off-the-shoulder sweater, exuded a wild, captivating allure. Passers-by couldn't help but turn their heads. Several leering men even began to whistle, their eyes glued to her. But their gazes shifted to Harry Osborn trailing behind Mary Jane Watson, expressions turning to disdain and ridicule. After all, this guy, strutting around downtown in shorts and flip-flops, a blight on the cityscape, was now dogging a rare beauty like her.